Alright guys, such coming again today. I hope you're doing that and enjoying your day. So far, the Esports World Cup begins tomorrow. The teams have arrived out in Riyadh with a $1.8 million prize pool on offer over the next couple of days. But the big question that many have is what's going to happen after this tournament is over. Depending who wins, depending who loses, what changes are we likely to see? And some Reddit detectives suggesting that OpTic Simp may have become one step closer after this tournament has ended. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. We've got plenty to get into today. The players are arrived out there. I mean, a lot of these are all coming out over the last few hours, really. Now, some of the players, I think after what happened last year, I was maybe surprised that some of the guys didn't arrive out there like several days in advance, just because many of the players adjusting with the jet lag, and today, on the Wednesday, is media day. That's how it was before. It's media day, and they're going to have an awful lot to do today. I mean, you guys remember some of the clips that came out of that last year, that, you know, this is really super, or whatever it was, the American Psycho thing that they sat down with TJ and Dashy and those guys and did. Speaking of TJ, actually, here he is. Stanley's there. We got Beans in the background as well. Of course, he's playing for Team Orchid, who spent some time with the Falcons, actually, in their facility over the last few days. So out there in Riyadh, I'm not going to be out there this time, but have a look at this. The OpTic boys are flying in with, I mean, it makes sense, really, having won the World Championship, with some business class upgrades, baby. Here we go. It's kind of funny, right? Some people will tweet out their seat and whatever as they're traveling out to Riyadh or to any event, really. Some people will not. The people that don't, probably in economy. The people that do, they're probably in business or first or whatever. So, yeah, look, makes sense. They won the World Championship. Makes sense to get the little upgrade. And to be fair, if you get some sleep on the flight, it may help you out. Of course, the coaches, they're not playing, but they are coaching, right? And they're actually properly coaching this time. Whether it's going to be JP or Karma in the comms behind the OpTic guys, we'll see. Of course, we've got Dashy in the background as well. And then there was this image too that was doing the rounds as well, when you've got JP and Karma looking at their notes, presumably preparing for the weekends. So it's going to be exciting to see how it goes. There, of course, are some questions around Karma and what he's been up to lately, and we'll get into that over the coming minutes because that is definitely the key talking point of the day. So anyway, they're out there, and Dashy arrived. This is the Saudi Arabian airport. This he put on his Instagram. There was also this one, which is pretty cool. You guys can see on the left-hand side here as well. Scrap arrived out there. So they all pretty much arrived at the same time. A lot of these were coming out this morning. So, you know, they pretty much got today, which is media day, and then tomorrow they start. So they might get to do a bit of prep, but it is interesting, right? Because typically the players, they like to get to these events a little bit earlier so they can at least have Wednesday typically as practice day, right? Whereas for the World Cup, I think Wednesday is more like media day. So really your preparation for the tournament in terms of getting some scrims in is not really happening a lot of the time at the EWC unless you arrived out there a couple of days early, which maybe the Falcons guys did, but even then I think people are on a pretty level playing field here this weekend. But this is pretty cool. So OpTic got this letter. This had a little Dashy thing on it, but it was addressed to Dashy, Shotzzy, Mercules, Huke, Karma and JP. We are honoured to welcome the back-to-back, should be hyphenated but whatever, world champs OpTic Gaming to this year's Esports World Cup. Green Wall. OpTic is one of the founding organisations of Call of Duty and a driving force in the content creation space that pushes the whole scene forward. Your legacy was built brick by brick and year after year, turning this organisation into a pillar of the Call of Duty community. Fighting through a season of ups and downs, this squad has cemented their legacy in the history books with one of the most dominant champs performances in Call of Duty history. No one is doubting you anymore. Now you have one final chance to prove you can do it all again. Now, some people were looking into this one final chance thing and saying, oh, is it the final ever World Cup? I think they just mean it's the final event of the year. But anyway, OpTic got this cool message. I don't know if the other teams, I imagine the other teams got something similar, to be fair. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes, but probably nothing quite to this extent. Some other footage as well. I mean, Rencor was out there for the first time. Heretics, as you guys might remember, last year had like just the worst event ever. I don't understand why they were so bad. This year, of course, Renkor's there for his first time, and you've got Dashy and, well, Kenny enjoying the desserts on offer. I know the guys were all over this last year, and you know, Dashy, I think it was actually Kenny was in the replies to this one and said, yeah, we're going to be spawn trapping that every single day of the week. This is really nice as well. So if you guys remember, a few days ago now, there was a picture of Clay from the Falcons facility, and there was Beans playing against TJ at the ping pong table at the Falcons facility, and Vance says, shout out the Falcons and Dens, hooking the boys up with their facility and apartments for an EWC bootcamp, top class from everyone. So this is interesting to keep an eye on, right? right? Because Team Orchid, they are going to be in Group B, I think. They are with the, well, I think it's Surge and 100 Thieves, which is definitely a challenging group, with Gentlemates in there as well. But it's pretty rare nowadays that you get boot camps at all. But the Falcons guys did invite Team Orchid, Bance, Beans, Harry, and Mythics. It was Henry, but then he got dropped for Beans. You guys know the story on that. To their facility, spend a few days with them, get ready for the tournament. Beans then, does like a heart. I mean, it's an eagle, but I guess he's trying to do a falcon emoji or something. And then Clay says, Bance's treat was far more heartfelt and meaningful than yours. You just got to do better. But, we've seen this in the past, right? Teams boot camp before tournaments and then, they help each other improve. Of course, it's not like Team Orchid are considered to be the best challengers team here, so it may not boost them or boost Falcons massively, but we know that Falcons are in that group with Boston and Toronto, so they're going to be trying to make it through there. Maybe this is something that will help both of those teams when they get to Riyadh, because, as I say, it's not like the teams are going to have an awful lot of practice time today to get ready for tomorrow, and maybe Falcons also finessed it when it comes to the flights, because lots of people flying out from Texas directly or even flying out of LA, and that's a trek, right? You're changing in Frankfurt, maybe you're changing in Doha in Qatar, there's maybe Istanbul, I don't know, in Turkey. There's a couple of options. But Clay instead flew from Washington, DC and actually had a direct flight. So that might be the play for, because there's probably some places that do fly direct to Riyadh. Many do not, understandably, because it's so far away. Even from Washington, DC, very much on the East Coast, it's still a 13-hour direct non-stop flight. So, but yeah, Clay says flew direct from Washington, which maybe that's the play. Maybe it's going to help the Falcons to some degree if that's the flight that at least some of those guys took. Just quickly on the organisation stuff, we talked about it yesterday. Toronto Ultra becoming Toronto Koi, possibly for next year. We'll see about that. Now, JKL in the reply says, but is there more, Mr. Trey? And maybe that, so pretty much what he's implying is that there are more organisational rebrands to come. Now, is he implying that there are organisational changes, right? Because it has been a big talking point. Boston, Ravens, hopefully Ravens, maybe not Boston, I don't know. Like, we'll see. But there has been interest in spots changing around, right? And teams getting bought out. There was talk about a couple of Saudi organisations, Twisted Mind and Al Qatsir Esports potentially being interested as well. I'm sure there are others also in the conversation. And there's probably other organisations as well outside of Saudi that also want into the CDL. So if an arrangement will happen, and I'm sure those conversations are ongoing, that may well make the decision for the league going forward. But also, could there be something else happening, right? Okay, Toronto Koi are still going to be in Toronto, but we know that Hex, for example, I know that there was some reaction to this tweet from JKL because Hex has been very adamant about the fact that he's really excited that out in Riyadh they get to represent OpTic Gaming. And there's many of us kind of like OG fans who are saying, great, OpTic Gaming, FaZe Clan, and the other actual brand names are back. It's no longer the city-based stuff, and that's almost always how it is out at the Esports World Cup. And as long as you're part of an organisation that has other brands, okay, Boston Breach is still Boston Breach, but I guess they could have represented Oxygen Esports while that was a thing. There's some other options there. So the point, I guess, is it possible for those teams to totally rebrand? Because the more that time goes on, the more it becomes very clear that if Hex had his way, it would be OpTic Gaming in every domain. And that makes perfect sense. And I think that will happen eventually. Whether it's able to happen now or whether JKL's talking about another rebrand or sale, that is a very interesting question. But yeah, as I say, it's FaZe Clan. Last year, they were still actually representing Atlanta FaZe for some reason. But this time it is officially FaZe Clan, and after 2,166 days, they're once again representing FaZe Clan in the Call of Duty domain. Let's talk about, though, some of the questions on the roster stuff going into this tournament. Couple of players making their debut this weekend. aBeZy for Toronto, or I guess I'm going to have to start calling him something different there. So, he's a player with some promise, for sure. I'm excited to see, really excited, actually, to see how he gets on with that Toronto team. Bink and Nia making their pro debuts for Team War, Craze and Mamba on Omid, and then Mythics on Team Orchid, as we know. So those are the players to keep an eye on. But last night, there was some discussion about what's going to happen to these rosters after the World Cup. it wasn't really this, although this was kind of funny, right? Look at it. The fact that the trio are sitting nicely next to each other, and there's a bit of a gap between Simp and Drazah. You know, probably an actual, sensible gap, or you know what I'm saying there, right? People are saying, oh, here we go. They're making a change. But of course, they could make more than one change, and we believe that Falcons may be interested in aBeZy after the World Cup. They may try and go and get him. It's a little unclear whether he's a free agent or not. There have been various theories on that as of late. Simp is probably not a free agent, but he might be gettable if somebody wanted him, and if Simp wanted to leave. The big talk has been about OpTic, just because if OpTic, let's say, don't win the World Cup, and let's say Thieves win the World Cup and OpTic don't win it, then people are going to say, well, if Simp's available, if FaZe are blowing it up, you've at least got to think about making that change. And I think you at least have to think about it. And there's been lots of debate in the community lately on whether that would be, it wouldn't be fair on Huke, but it might be something that is worth considering. Now, yesterday, you know how it is, there were some Reddit detectives having a look on this site called Dolphin Radar. Now, it seems like what this site does is it will show you like different statistics about various accounts, especially Instagram, and it will show you who different accounts have recently followed. Now, if you look at Damon Karma, which is Karma's Instagram handle, you'll see the accounts that he's recently followed, and, well, you've got OpTic on there, which we'll get to why that might be interesting in a second, USA Crime, and then T-Mart, and then Simp Chris, right? So you've got Chris Lear, also known as Mr. MVP Simp, recently followed by the coach of OpTic Texas. What does it mean, right? Is this the big red flag to say, hey, this is actually happening? Now, a couple of things to say about this. I went on Karma's Instagram and he follows 37 people. And that is not a lot, right? Like, if he followed 400 or 500 or whatever, then this would be a little bit more relevant, because this site shows you who he recently followed, but it certainly doesn't tell you how long ago he actually followed them. Because in my head, if he's only following 37 people, it's plausible that he followed Simp ages ago, right? But he is still his second most recent followed account, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he followed him in the last couple of weeks. He may have done, I can't rule it out, because he does follow Simp, and clearly he did so relatively recently with respect to the amount of people that he follows. But to me, OpTic are his fourth most recent followed account, and I mean, he's been on OpTic for quite some time, so I think it's plausible, at least in my eyes, that he actually followed Simp quite a while ago, and it might not be relevant to the recent discussion, but it is nonetheless interesting that of all the players that he just happened to have on his recently followed list and was second most recent, it happens to be the one player who is most getting linked to that OpTic team right now. So, you can understand why people are going to look at this and say, well, is that a little bit too much of a coincidence? And maybe the fair answer there is yes, but I just wanted to say that there are, a couple of other ways to look at it, right? Because if he followed OpTic relatively recently, I know that it is Karma, right? So, he kind of does these type of things, but I still thought it was interesting that he's been coaching this team and he won a couple of world championships with this team. So it wouldn't make sense if he followed OpTic a couple of weeks ago, would it really? It would make sense if he followed OpTic quite a while back. So for Simp, you might imagine that it could be a pretty similar story. But it's a discovery nonetheless that Karma is now following Simp. Is that because he's going to send him a message on Instagram and hit the DMs? I mean, maybe not impossible, I suppose. But I think everyone involved in this situation kind of knows where they stand and what it looks like, right? OpTic know, and Huke will also know to some degree, that the better he plays at the World Cup, the better OpTic do, the more it puts less pressure on him after the World Cup, right? You might say after they won the World Championship, there's absolutely no debate to be had on it, but I mean, let's say hypothetically OpTic bomb out in the group stage, they lose to Cloud9 and G2 somehow. Do you think they're sticking for next year in that scenario? I would possibly, but I would say kind of unlikely at that point. So I don't think they're going to get knocked out in groups, by the way. I'm just making the point that depending on how OpTic place this event, it will influence their decision to some degree, unless they think the event is just super cheese, which is also possible. So very much enjoyed your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.